Today we're going to be going over how to build a ProGCC controller from scratch. We'll be using the parts that we sell on our site in order to build the controller. To start, we have a ProGCC V2 board with the capacitor fix already soldered in place. All boards that you order directly from Handheld Legend will have the cap soldered onto them. To begin, we'll take the back half of our shell and we'll use flush cutters to trim the plastic post down as far as we can. This is followed by putting in the sync button and the light pipe. They will both sit flush in the controller and are followed by a black piece that will sit over top of them both and get screwed down on either side to secure them. The screws that we'll use for this black piece are two 6mm silver screws that are provided in our Phillips head screw kits. Alternatively, you can also use a 6mm Torx head screw. The red motherboard of the controller can then be placed into the shell. This is followed by two more silver 6mm screws. The screw on the left side of the motherboard may add tension to the motherboard if you tighten it too much. Make sure you only snug it down just enough to hold the board. From here, we will insert the bottom light pipe of the controller and screw it down with the smallest silver screw that is provided in our Phillips head screw kit. Alternatively, you can also use a 6mm Torx head screw. If you want to add rumble motors to your controller, check out the description for our upcoming rumble guide. From here, we'll move on to the other half of the controller. We start by putting the buttons into the shell, followed by their membranes. We will then place the white PCB over top of the buttons and their membranes and secure it down with two 6mm silver screws on both sides. Now we move on to the trigger portion of the install. To begin, we start by taking our ribbon cable and placing it under the tab on the frame piece. We then take our ribbon cable and seat the bottom half of the cable, making sure that it slides underneath the plastic correctly like this. It will then sit on two plastic pegs that will hold the bottom half of the ribbon cable in place. From here, we can mount the top half of the cable by pressing the ribbon cable over the hole and then locking it down on the other side. We can then repeat this with the other half of the frame, making sure that the ribbon cable is seated properly on both sides. Some ribbon cables have adhesive on them that will allow them to be glued down to the frame. However, since ours do not, we will want to make sure that our ribbon cable goes over the holes so that a screw does not catch it and destroy it. If your ribbon cable does happen to have glue tabs, then you can make sure that you secure it down flat against the frame. Next up is the membranes for these buttons. The bottom membrane simply gets pulled through the holes on the frame. The top membranes go over top of the pin and get hooked down on the other side like so. After we have the membranes in place, we can start with the buttons. The top buttons will have a tab on the button that needs to slide into the frame. Then the button can click into place where it sits. This repeats on the other side. The bottom buttons are held in by metal rods that will need to slide in place through the buttons. You'll know that the rod is all the way in when it lines up with the plastic here. From this point, we have our trigger frame assembled and it's ready to install into the front half of our shell. We'll place it onto the white PCB and make sure that it's securely pressed down. You may have to make sure that the center hole is flush. If not, you'll have to press down with your middle finger and thumb until it snaps down into place. Ensuring that the top half of the controller lines up correctly like this, you'll know you did it right. From here, you can secure it down with the last 2 silver screws from our Phillips head set. You can also use 2 6mm Torx screws here. Once you have the frame piece securely screwed down, you can then connect the ribbon cable to the latch on the white PCB. Now that we have the 2 halves of the controller assembled independently, we can begin assembling them together. To do this, we will need to take our ribbon cable and pre-fold it so that the cable doesn't get in the way of the stick and catch its movement. First, we'll insert it into the red PCB with the blue side of the cable facing up. We fold it a total of 4 times to ensure that it doesn't get caught. 2 longer folds and 2 shorter ones. You want the metal contacts to be facing upwards on the final fold. Then, connect it to the white PCB. This is followed by closing up the controller and making sure from the side view that it won't get caught in the stick. From here, we can take the battery cover off the back of the controller and start by inserting 2 7mm black screws from the Phillips head screw kit into these top 2 posts. You may need a longer screwdriver to reach these ones. The Mako driver from iFixit isn't long enough to reach them. We can then replace the battery cover and start with the 4 black screws that will hold the battery cover in place. They are all 7mm long. Once they have been tightened, you can then move on to the grips of the controller. The grips will both get the longest black screws provided in the Phillips head kit. And from this point, you then have a fully built ProGCC controller. Be sure to read the user guide as well as our other wiki postings on the ProGCC. And if you have any questions, please join our Discord, which is linked on the wiki.